My wife Evelyn went to our beach house in the Outer Banks 4 times a year. I hadn't been there in 26 years. When she passed away last week, my children did not cry. They did not mourn. Instead, they screamed, "Sell that useless place immediately." I decided to drive down there one last time before letting it go. But when I arrived, the gate was not rusty as they said. My key did not work. And inside, living in my house, wearing my late wife's favorite necklace, was a woman I had never met. And hiding behind her legs was a 6-year-old boy who looked exactly like me. Before I tell you the terrifying secret I found behind that gate, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments which city you are watching from. Your support helps me expose the truth. My name is Harrison Blake. I am 70 years old, and I have spent 40 of those years pouring concrete and framing houses with these two hands. I built half the skyline in downtown Boston. I thought I was building a legacy for my family. I thought I was raising children who would respect the sweat on a man's brow. I was wrong. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer exactly 3 days after Evelyn died. We were in the living room of my brownstone in Boston. The guests had just left the funeral reception. The air still smelled of lilies and expensive scotch. My wife's ashes were in a blue ceramic urn on the mantelpiece. It was the only thing in the room that felt real. I was sitting in my leather armchair nursing a glass of bourbon. My hand was trembling slightly. It is a touch of Parkinson's, the doctor says. It is nothing I cannot handle, but to my children it looks like weakness. It looks like blood in the water. Brandon, my eldest son, was pacing in front of the window. He is 40 years old and a manager at a hedge fund. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first truck. He wasn't looking at his mother's urn. He was screaming into his phone. "Sell the crypto. Now, I don't care about the loss. Just liquidate the asset. I need liquidity by Monday." He slammed the phone down and massaged his temples. He looked at me with eyes that were cold and calculating. There was no grief in them, just stress and greed. Tiffany, my youngest daughter, sat next to me on the arm of the chair. She is 36. She used to be a model on Instagram, but now she mostly lives off the allowance I give her. She smelled of vanilla perfume and white wine. She put her arm around my shoulders. It felt heavy. It felt fake. "Dad," she whispered. Her voice was too sweet, like syrup covering a piece of rotten fruit. "We need to talk about the estate." I took a sip of bourbon. The burn felt good. It grounded me. "Not today, Tiffany. Your mother isn't even cold yet." Tiffany sighed. She looked at Brandon. It was a look of conspirators sharing a signal. She pulled a thick manila envelope from her designer purse. "We know it is hard, Dad. That is why we want to help you." Brandon and I spoke to the lawyers. The beach house in North Carolina. It is a money pit. The taxes are $12,000 a year. The maintenance is a nightmare. You haven't been there in decades. It is just rotting away. She slid the envelope onto my lap. We had the lawyers draw up a limited power of attorney, just for the real estate assets. It authorizes Brandon to liquidate the Outer Banks property immediately. We already have a cash buyer lined up. You just need to sign here. I looked down at the paper. The words swam before my eyes. Power of attorney. Authorization to sell. My heart hammered against my ribs. That beach house wasn't just an asset. I built that house. I poured the foundation myself in 1994. I framed the walls during the hottest summer on record. I built the deck where Evelyn used to sit and watch the sunrise. Every nail in that wood was driven by my love for her. And now, 48 hours after her death, they wanted to turn it into a check. I looked at Brandon. "Is this what you are doing while your mother's ashes are sitting right there? You are brokering deals." Brandon stopped pacing. He walked over and loomed over me. He is a tall man, but he has never done a day of physical labor in his life. His hands are soft. Mine are covered in calluses and scars. Be realistic, Dad, he said, his voice sharp. You are 70. You are shaking. You can barely hold that glass. You cannot manage a property 500 miles away. You are losing your grip. We are just trying to save you from yourself. Save me, or pay your debts. The room went silent. Brandon's jaw tightened. I knew about his gambling. I knew about the bad trades. I wasn't senile. I still read the financial reports. I set the glass down. I picked up the envelope. I looked at the signature line where my name was typed out in neat block letters. Harrison Blake. I thought about Evelyn. I thought about how she used to go down to that beach house alone. She said she needed time to paint, time to think. She loved that place. She made me promise never to sell it while she was alive. Well, she isn't alive anymore, Brandon said, as if reading my mind. Sign the paper, Dad. Don't be stubborn. It is for the best. I stood up. My eyes popped. My hand shook, but my grip was iron. I looked my son in the eye. No. Tiffany gasped. Dad, please. Don't be difficult. I am not being difficult, Tiffany. I am being the man who paid for your plastic surgery and your 3 failed startups. I am being the man who paid for Brandon's degree at Wharton. And I am telling you that I am not signing away my wife's memory so you can cover your margin calls. I took the thick document in both hands. The paper was high-quality legal bond. It was tough, but I was tougher. I ripped it. The sound was loud in the quiet room. Rip! I tore it in half, then in quarters. I threw the confetti of paper onto the expensive Persian rug. I am going to the beach house, I said. My voice was low and steady. I am going to see it for myself. If it is rotting like you say, I will sell it, but I will do it on my terms, not yours. Brandon's face turned red. A vein bulged in his neck. He stepped closer into my personal space. This was not the anger of a son. This was the aggression of a predator whose meal has just been snatched away. You are not going anywhere, he hissed. You are not fit to drive. Look at you. You are a mess. I am fit enough to write you out of the will, I said. Brandon laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. You think you have the power here, Dad. You don't. We have been talking to Dr. Eris. We told him about your memory lapses, about how you get confused in the evenings. I froze. What memory lapses? I didn't have memory lapses. We can have you declared incompetent, Brandon said softly. It is called a conservatorship. For your own protection, of course. If you get in that car, if you leave this house without signing that paper, I will call the judge first thing in the morning. We will freeze your accounts. We will take your keys. We will put you in a home where you can be safe. I looked at Tiffany, my little girl. Surely she would not agree to this. Tiffany looked down at her shoes. Then she looked up at me. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. It is for your own good, Daddy. You are not well. Just sign the replacement copy and go to bed. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This was it. The moment every parent fears. The moment you realize you didn't raise children. You raised vultures, and they were circling. They thought I was weak. They thought the shaking hand meant a shaking mind. They were wrong. I looked at the clock. It was 2 a.m. Fine, I said. I sat back down. I acted defeated. I let my shoulders slump. You win. I am tired. I cannot fight you both. Leave the papers on the table. I will sign them in the morning after I sleep. Just let me sleep. Brandon smiled. It was the smile of a shark. Good choice, Dad. We will see you at breakfast. They walked out of the room. I heard them whispering in the hallway. High fives. Victory lap. I waited. I waited 10 minutes, then 20. I waited until I heard the heavy thud of Brandon's bedroom door upstairs. I stood up. I didn't look at the papers. I walked to the mantelpiece and touched the cool ceramic of Evelyn's urn. I am sorry, Evelyn, I whispered. I raised monsters, but I am going to fix it. I did not take my Mercedes keys. Brandon had probably already taken the spare set. Instead, I walked to the kitchen drawer. Way in the back, under a pile of takeout menus, was a single brass key. It belonged to my old Ford F-150, my work truck, the one I drove when I was still pouring concrete. The one Brandon refused to ride in because it was too dirty. I slipped out the back door into the garage. The truck was covered in dust, but the engine roared to life on the first turn. It sounded like freedom. I backed out of the driveway without turning on the headlights. I didn't look back at the brownstone. I didn't look back at the life I had built. I pointed the truck south, towards North Carolina, towards the truth. I thought I was driving away from a conflict. I thought the worst thing I would face was a rusty gate and a dilapidated house. I had no idea that I was driving straight into a mystery that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my wife. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 2. The sound reverberated through the empty house like a gavel hitting a judge's desk. I was lying in bed staring at the ceiling, but sleep was a luxury I could not afford. My body was tired, but my mind was racing with the image of that torn power of attorney document lying on the Persian rug. I knew my children well enough to know that silence from them was not surrender. It was strategy. I needed a glass of water. I swung my legs out of bed, and the floorboards creaked under my weight. I moved slowly towards the door, trying to keep my tremors under control. My hand hovered over the doorknob when I heard a voice floating up from the living room. It was low and hushed, but in the silence of the night, it carried clearly. It was Brandon. He was still awake. I cracked the door open just an inch. The light from the hallway spilled in a thin line across my feet. "Don't worry about it, Leonard." Brandon's voice was arrogant and dismissive. "The old man is not going anywhere." I took the keys to the Mercedes from his dresser while he was in the bathroom. "He is stuck here." My heart hammered against my ribs. He had gone into my bedroom. He had rifled through my things like a common thief. I heard him laugh, soft and cruel. "By tomorrow afternoon, I will have Dr. Aris sign the competency evaluation. We will file for emergency conservatorship on Monday morning. Once we have control of his accounts, we can liquidate the beach house without his signature. He is just confused, Leonard. He does not know what is good for him anymore." I closed the door silently. My breath came in shallow gasps. This was not just greed. This was a coup. My own son was planning to strip me of my rights, to turn me into a child in the eyes of the law, just to cover his financial mistakes. I was a prisoner in my own home. They thought they were so smart. They thought they had checkmated me because they took the keys to the S-Class sedan. They forgot who I was. They forgot that before I was a wealthy contractor in a suit, I was a man who built foundations in the mud. They forgot about the beast. I did not pack a suitcase. A suitcase makes noise. A suitcase looks like leaving. I dressed in the dark, pulling on my old work jeans and a flannel shirt. I skipped the loafers and laced up my steel-toed boots. They felt heavy and familiar on my feet. I moved through the house like a ghost. I avoided the creaky step on the third stair. I bypassed the living room where Brandon was still plotting my demise and slipped into the kitchen. I did not go for the car key rack. I went to the junk drawer next to the fridge. I dug past the dried-out pens and the takeout menus until my fingers brushed against cold metal. It was a single brass key on a faded ring. I slipped out the side door into the detached garage. The air was cold and bit at my exposed skin. The automatic lights flickered on, revealing the sleek black Mercedes that Brandon was so proud to drive. But I walked past it. I walked to the back corner where a dusty tarp covered a large shape. I pulled the tarp down. Dust motes danced in the light. There she was, my 1998 Ford F-150. The paint was fading, and there was a dent in the bumper from a job site in '99, but she was solid steel. This was the truck that built the Blake Empire. Brandon hated it. He called it an eyesore and begged me to scrap it years ago. I kept it because it reminded me of when money was hard to earn and meant something. I opened the passenger door. The cab smelled of old oil and sawdust. It smelled like work. It smelled like dignity. I placed Evelyn's blue urn on the passenger seat and strapped it in with the seatbelt. "We are going for a ride, Evie," I whispered. "Just like old times." I reached behind the bench seat and felt the familiar shape of my Remington shotgun wrapped in oilcloth. I checked the chamber. It was empty, but the box of shells was right where I left it, in the glove compartment. I hoped I would not need it, but I was done being unprepared. I climbed into the driver's seat. The vinyl was cold and cracked. I put the key in the ignition. This was the moment of truth. She hadn't been started in 6 months. If the battery was dead, I was finished. Brandon would hear me trying, and it would be over. I pumped the gas pedal twice. I turned the key. The engine sputtered once. I held my breath. "Come on, old girl, do it for me." I turned it again. With a roar that shook the tools on the shelves, the V8 engine came to life. It was loud. It was glorious. I didn't wait for it to warm up. I hit the garage door opener and threw the truck into reverse. As the door began to rise, I saw the kitchen light in the main house flip on. Brandon had heard. I backed out, screeching the tires on the pavement. I saw a silhouette appear in the kitchen window. Then the back door flew open. Brandon ran out into the yard, still in his suit, waving his arms frantically. He was shouting something, but the rumble of the engine drowned him out. I shifted into drive and floored it. The truck leaped forward, leaving my son standing in a cloud of exhaust fumes. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. If I did, I might turn around and do something I would regret. The drive south was a blur of highway lights and dark stretches of road. 10 hours. That is how long it takes to get from Boston to the Outer Banks if you don't stop. My hands stopped shaking the moment they gripped the steering wheel. The vibration of the road traveled up my arms and settled in my chest, replacing the anxiety with adrenaline. I drove through the dawn. I watched the sun come up over the Jersey Turnpike, turning the gray sky into a bruised purple. I thought about Evelyn. I thought about how she used to hum along to the radio on these long drives. We used to bring the kids down here every summer before they got too cool for family vacations, before they got too busy spending my money to spend time with me. When had it all gone wrong? Was it the private schools? Was it the cars I bought them when they turned 16? I tried to give them everything I never had, and in the process, I deprived them of the one thing that builds character. The struggle. By 9 in the morning, I was crossing the border into North Carolina. That was when my phone started to melt down. I had forgotten to turn it off. It buzzed on the dashboard, dancing across the plastic with every vibration. Incoming call. Brandon. Incoming call, Tiffany. Text from Brandon. Pick up the phone. Dad. This is insanity. Text from Brandon. You are not well, pull over. Text from Tiffany. Daddy, please come back. We are so worried. Text from Brandon. I am calling the police. I am reporting the truck stolen. I laughed. A dry, bitter sound. Stolen. It was my name on the title. My sweat that paid for it. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail notification. I didn't listen to it. I didn't want to hear his voice. I didn't want to hear the fake concern masking the real panic. He wasn't worried about my safety. He was worried that his golden goose was driving away. He was worried that if I reached that house I would find whatever it was he was trying to hide, because there had to be something. You don't try to declare your father incompetent just to sell a vacation home. You don't panic like that over a piece of real estate unless that real estate holds a secret that could ruin you. The buzzing was relentless. It was like a mosquito buzzing in my ear. It was the tether that bound me to them, to their expectations, to their manipulation. I checked the road. It was empty. A long stretch of asphalt cutting through the pine barrens. I rolled down the window. The wind roared into the cabin, carrying the scent of pine needles and salt air. I picked up the phone. It was an expensive device. Another thing Brandon insisted I needed. "I am not coming back," I said to the empty air. I threw the phone out the window. It tumbled through the air, hitting the asphalt at 70 miles per hour. I watched in the side mirror as it shattered into 100 pieces, bouncing into the ditch. Silence returned to the cab. Just the hum of the tires and the roar of the engine. I looked at the urn next to me. "We are almost there, Evie. Just you and me." I pressed harder on the accelerator. The old truck groaned, but it responded, pushing past 80. I was tired. My eyes felt like they were full of sand. My lower back ached. But I felt more alive than I had in years. I was a man on a mission. The salt air filled my lungs as I stepped out of the truck. It was the smell of memories. It was the smell of the summers Evelyn and I spent here when the kids were small enough to still love us. But as I looked at the property before me, the nostalgia evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, hard knot of fury in my gut. Brandon had described this place as a disaster zone. He had sat in my living room with a straight face and told me the salt water had eaten away at the infrastructure. He said the roof was leaking, the siding was rot, and the grounds were overgrown with weeds. He painted a picture of a money pit that was hemorrhaging cash, a liability that needed to be cut loose immediately to save the estate. He was a liar. The house that stood before me was not a ruin. It was immaculate. It was in better condition than the day I finished building it 26 years ago. The late afternoon sun glinted off the windows, which were not covered in grime but were crystal clear. The siding was not warped. It was freshly painted, a crisp, nautical white that looked like it had been done last week. I walked toward the gate, expecting to fight with the rusted hinges Brandon had complained about. But the iron was black and smooth, free of even a speck of oxidation. It looked like it had been powder-coated recently. Beyond the gate, the long driveway was not cracked. It was paved with high-end cobblestones that must have cost a fortune. And the garden. My God, the garden. Evelyn loved roses. It was the one thing she insisted on planting in the sandy soil, even though everyone said they wouldn't survive the coastal winds. I looked at the flower beds lining the fence. They were exploding with color. Red, pink, and yellow blooms were perfectly pruned. There wasn't a single weed in sight. This wasn't nature taking back the land. This was professional landscaping. This was care. Who was doing this? Who was paying for this? I gripped the iron bars of the gate, my knuckles turning white. My mind raced through the financial statements Brandon showed me every month. Maintenance costs $0, repairs $0. He had been showing me false books for years. Money was flowing into this place, but from where? And why? Then my eyes caught something on the perfectly manicured lawn. A splash of bright red against the green grass. It was a bicycle. It was not an old rusted bike left behind by a tenant. It was brand new, a small red bicycle with training wheels and colorful streamers hanging from the handlebars. It was lying on its side as if a child had just dropped it to run inside for a snack. My breath caught in my throat. A child. Brandon didn't have children. Tiffany didn't have children. We didn't rent this place out. Or at least, that is what I was told. Squatters don't buy expensive landscaping. Squatters don't install cobblestone driveways. And squatters certainly don't buy brand new bicycles for their children. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the key ring. My hand was shaking, but not from Parkinson's this time. It was from adrenaline. I found the brass key for the front gate, the one I had kept on my ring for 2 decades. I thrust it toward the lock. Clang. Metal hit metal, but there was no keyhole. I blinked, rubbing my eyes. I leaned in closer. The old heavy-duty padlock I had installed myself was gone. In its place was a sleek black box mounted directly into the ironwork. It was a biometrics smart lock, the kind you see in high-security office buildings in Boston, not on a private beach house. I stared at it. A small camera lens stared back at me. I tried to jam my key into the emergency override slot at the bottom, but it didn't fit. The cylinder had been changed. Of course it had. Access denied. The voice didn't come from a person. It came from a speaker hidden in the gatepost. It was a robotic female voice, cool and detached. Please present authorized credential or face identification. I stood there frozen. Authorized credential. This was my house. I built this gate. I welded these bars. And now a machine was telling me I didn't belong here. I looked through the bars at the house again. I saw movement in the window. The front curtain twitched. Someone was inside. Someone was watching me. Open the gate, I shouted, my voice cracking with 70 years of accumulated grit. This is Harrison Blake. Open this damn gate. The machine ignored me. Ignored. The camera lens zoomed in with a soft mechanical whir. A red ring of light started to pulse around the scanner. Warning. Unrecognized individual. You are trespassing on private property. Police have been notified. The alarm started. It wasn't a deafening siren, but a high-pitched rhythmic chirp that was designed to alert the neighbors. It pierced the quiet seaside air. I took a step back. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a sledgehammer. Police. If the police came, they would run my plates. They would see Brandon's report that the truck was stolen. They would see a confused old man yelling at a gate. They would put me in custody, and Brandon would win. He would get his conservatorship. He would lock me away in a home and sell this place before I ever found out the truth. I looked at the red bicycle again. I looked at the roses. I looked at the house that held the ghost of my wife and the lies of my son. I am not running away. Not this time. I turned around and walked back to the truck. I didn't run. I marched. I reached into the truck bed past the toolbox and grabbed the heavy iron crowbar I used for demolition work. It was 3 feet of solid steel, cold and heavy in my hand. It was a tool of destruction, but today it was a key. I walked back to the gate. The alarm was still chirping. The red light was still pulsing. Warning. Armed intruder. Warning. I didn't care about the warning. I didn't care about the camera recording my face. Let them see. Let Brandon see. Let him see that his father isn't a feeble old man who signs papers and dies quietly. Let him see that Harrison Blake is still the man who can tear down a wall with his bare hands. I jammed the flat end of the crowbar into the gap between the electronic lock and the gatepost. I wedged it in deep until I felt it bite into the metal. I planted my feet. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the ocean and the roses. I thought about the torn power of attorney. I thought about the fake tears at the funeral. I heaved. The muscles in my back screamed. My shoulders burned. For a second, nothing happened. The lock held firm. Technology fighting against brute force. Then I heard a crack. I gritted my teeth and pulled harder, putting all 200 pounds of my weight behind the bar. The electronic lock sparked. The plastic casing cracked. With a screech of tearing metal, the mechanism gave way. The gate swung open. The alarm turned into a continuous high-pitched wail. I tossed the crowbar onto the cobblestones. I stepped over the broken lock. I walked past the red bicycle. I marched up the front steps of my house, ready to face whatever or whoever was waiting for me on the other side of that door. The front door was solid mahogany. It was the door I had hung myself 26 years ago, sanding it until it was as smooth as glass. Now it stood between me and the answers I needed. The alarm on the gate was still wailing behind me, a high-pitched scream that grated on my nerves. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the doorbell. I was done asking for permission to enter my own life. I gripped the handle. It was unlocked. I threw the door open with enough force that it banged against the interior wall. I stepped across the threshold, the crowbar still in my left hand, my right hand resting near the waistband of my jeans where the shotgun shells were. I was ready for a fight. I was ready for drug addicts. I was ready for squatters who had trashed the place. I was ready for rot and mildew. I was not ready for the smell. It hit me like a physical blow, stopping me dead in my tracks. Cinnamon, nutmeg, warm baked apples and butter. It was the smell of Sunday mornings in Boston before the kids grew up. It was the smell of Thanksgiving. It was Evelyn's smell. For a second, I forgot where I was. I forgot about the anger and the betrayal. I thought I was home. I thought Evelyn was in the kitchen wearing her favorite yellow apron, humming a tune while she pulled a pie out of the oven. My heart leaped in my chest, a painful flutter of hope that defied all logic. "Evelyn," I whispered. Then reality came crashing back. Evelyn was gone. Her ashes were in the truck. This wasn't a memory. This was a violation. Someone was in my house using my oven, baking my wife's recipe. "Get out!" The scream came from the hallway leading to the kitchen. I spun around, dropping the crowbar. It hit the hardwood floor with a heavy clatter. A woman came charging at me. She wasn't much older than 30. She had wild, dark hair and eyes that were wide with terror and rage. She was wielding an aluminum baseball bat, swinging it like a weapon of war. I instinctively raised my arm to block. "Get back!" I shouted. She didn't stop. She swung the bat hard. I barely managed to dodge, stepping back and colliding with the entryway table. A vase crashed to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. "I am calling the police!" she screamed. "Get out of my house, you crazy old man!" She raised the bat for another strike. "Stop!" I roared. I used my command voice, the voice that had directed crews of 200 men on construction sites, the voice that brooked no argument. She hesitated. Her chest was heaving. She stood there, gripping the bat with white knuckles, creating a barrier between me and the living room. That was when I saw the movement behind her. A small head popped up from behind the beige sofa. A little boy, maybe 6 years old, with messy brown hair and terrified eyes. He was clutching a stuffed bear. "Run, Leo," the woman shouted without looking back. "Run to the bathroom and lock the door, just like we practiced." The boy didn't move. He stared at me. I looked at the woman. I looked at the boy. I looked at the house around me. It wasn't a squatter's den. It was immaculate. The floors were polished. There were fresh flowers on the mantel. The furniture was different from what we had left years ago, but it was tasteful, comfortable. There were family photos on the side table, but from this distance I couldn't see the faces. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice shaking with rage. "What are you doing in my house? Where is my wife? Where is Evelyn?" The name hung in the air like smoke. The woman froze. The bat lowered an inch. Her eyes narrowed, searching my face. "Evelyn," she repeated. "Yes, Evelyn," I snapped. "My wife. The owner of this house. Did she hire you? Are you the caretaker? Why did you change the locks?" The woman didn't answer immediately. She took a step back, keeping herself between me and the boy. She looked at me with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. Her gaze traveled from my work boots up to my flannel shirt and finally to my face. She studied my jawline, my eyes, the way I held myself. Then she looked at the wall behind me. I turned slowly to follow her gaze. Hanging in the entryway was a framed photograph. It was an old picture, one I had forgotten about. It was taken on the deck of this very house 20 years ago. In the photo I was younger, my hair was still dark, and I was laughing with my arm around Evelyn. We looked happy. We looked in love. The woman looked at the photo, then back at me. The aggression started to drain out of her stance, replaced by something else. Something like shock, she whispered. You are him. I am Harrison Blake, I said, straightening my back. I built this house, and now put down the bat and tell me who the hell you are before I drag you out of here myself. She didn't put down the bat, but she lowered it to her side. She took a deep breath. I am Maya, she said. Maya. The name meant nothing to me. I had never heard Evelyn mention a Maya, and the boy I asked, nodding toward the sofa. My son, she said sharply, shifting her weight to block my view of him. Leo, stay down. I took a step forward. Maya tensed up again. Look, lady, I don't want to hurt you or the kid, but you are trespassing. My son told me this place was empty. He told me it was rotting. But I walk in here and I smell apple pie. I see new furniture. I see a smart lock on the gate. Someone has been living here. Someone has been spending money here. I looked her dead in the eye. Did Evelyn know you were here? Maya laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. No, I was here, she said. Evelyn lived here. She lived here with us. This was her home. My knees felt weak. I reached out and grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. What are you talking about? I asked. Evelyn lived in Boston. She only came here for vacations. A few weeks a year. That is what she told me. Maya shook her head slowly. She looked at me with pity now, which was worse than the anger. She came here 4 times a year, yes. But she stayed for months at a time. She spent every Christmas here, every Easter. She spent her birthdays here. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Christmas. Evelyn always said she was going to a spa retreat in Vermont for Christmas. She said her arthritis needed the cold, dry air. She said she needed time alone to meditate. I spent those Christmases working or sitting alone in the big empty house in Boston, waiting for her to come back. She lied to me, I whispered. Maya stepped closer. She seemed to realize I wasn't going to attack her. I was just a broken old man standing in the ruins of his marriage. She didn't just live here, Maya said softly. She built a life here. A life away from... She stopped. She bit her lip, away from what I asked. Away from me. Maya didn't answer. She walked over to the mantel and picked up a small framed photo. She handed it to me. It was a picture of Evelyn. But not the Evelyn I knew. In Boston, Evelyn wore stiff designer suits and pearls. She rarely smiled. She was always worried about appearances, about what the neighbors would think. In this photo, Evelyn was wearing a loose sundress. Her hair was windblown and messy. She was sitting on the floor playing with a toddler. She was laughing with her head thrown back, her eyes crinkled with pure joy. She looked 20 years younger. She looked free. I stared at the picture. My thumb brushed over her face. I hadn't seen her look like that in decades. She was happy here, I said, my voice cracking. She was loved here, Maya corrected. I looked up at her. Sharpness returned to my voice. I loved her. I gave her everything. I worked myself to the bone to give her that house in Boston, the cars, the jewelry. Maya's expression hardened. She took the photo back and placed it carefully on the mantel. That is not what she told us, she said. What did she tell you? Maya crossed her arms. She looked at me with a defiance that chilled me to the bone. She told us you hated this place. She told us you hated the ocean. She said you thought this house was a waste of money. That is a lie, I shouted. I built this house for her, Maya didn't flinch. She said you abandoned her, Harrison. She said you cared more about your contracts and your concrete than you cared about her. She said she was lonely in that big house in Boston. She said she was invisible to you. I opened my mouth to argue, to defend myself, but the words died in my throat. I thought about the late nights at the office. I thought about the missed anniversaries because of project deadlines. I thought about how many times Evelyn had asked me to go for a walk, and I had said I was too tired. I thought about how I had let Brandon handle the finances, how I had let Tiffany handle the social calendar. I had retreated into my work, thinking that providing money was the same as providing love. Had I abandoned her, in my own way? But to tell strangers that I hated this place, to tell them I was a monster who didn't care. That didn't sound like Evelyn. Evelyn was private. She protected the family reputation at all costs. Why would she tell this young woman such intimate, painful things? Unless she needed a reason. Unless she needed to explain why her husband never visited. Why she was living a double life. She had to paint me as the villain, I realized, to justify keeping them a secret. But why keep them a secret? I looked at Maya again. I looked at the boy Leo who was peeking over the sofa again. You are not just a caretaker, I said. Evelyn wouldn't spend Christmas with a caretaker. She wouldn't let a caretaker's kid call her. I stopped. I remembered what Brandon had said on the phone. She is a con artist. She blackmailed Mom. Did you force her to let you stay here? I asked quietly. Did you threaten her? Maya's face twisted in anger. She stepped forward, raising the bat again. How dare you, she hissed. Evelyn saved us. She saved my life. She saved Leo's life. She was the only family we had. And now she is gone, and you show up here with a crowbar and a gun, trying to take the only safe place we have left. She pointed the bat at the door. Get out, she said. I mean it. I have the deed. I have the papers. Evelyn gave us the right to be here. You have no power here, Harrison. Go back to Boston. Go back to your money. Leave us alone. I stood my ground. I wasn't leaving. Not until I understood why my wife had hidden a whole family from me. Not until I understood why this boy had my eyes. I am not going anywhere, I said. I sat down in the armchair. It was soft. It smelled like lavender. Evelyn's lavender. Call the police if you want, I said. Let them come. Let's settle this. Because I am not leaving this house until you tell me the truth about who you really are and why my wife lied to me for 6 years. Maya glared at me. The standoff stretched on. The alarm outside finally timed out and silenced, leaving only the sound of the ocean and our heavy breathing. Then the phone rang. Not my phone. I had thrown mine away. It was the landline on the side table. Maya looked at it. She looked at me. She picked it up. Hello, she said, her voice guarding. She listened for a moment. Her face went pale. The blood drained from her lips, leaving them ashen. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. She hung up the phone slowly. Her hand was trembling. Who was it? I asked. She swallowed hard. It was the main gate security, she whispered. They said a car just pulled up. A black Range Rover. Brandon, I said. Maya nodded. She looked at Leo, then back at me. The hostility in her eyes was replaced by pure panic. He is here, she said. He found us. Who found you? I asked, standing up. She didn't answer. She grabbed Leo's hand and pulled him from behind the sofa. We have to hide, she said. If he sees Leo, he will kill him. The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. My son. A killer. I looked at the woman who minutes ago had tried to bash my head in. Now she looked at me as if I was the only thing standing between her and death. Lock the door, I said, grabbing my crowbar. And then I heard it. the sound of tires crunching on the cobblestones outside. My son had arrived, and he hadn't come to talk. I walked over to the side table where the cordless landline sat in its cradle. It was an old model, one of the few things in this house that looked like it belonged to the past. The plastic was slightly yellowed, but the green light was steady. I picked it up and the dial tone hummed in my ear, a comforting sound of connection in a world that was rapidly spinning out of control. I did not have to look up the number. I dialed Brandon's cell phone, the same number I had paid the bill for since he was 16 years old. My fingers felt heavy on the keypad. I was calling the enemy, but he was also my flesh and blood. Part of me, the part that was still a father, hoped there was a misunderstanding, hoped that he would pick up and tell me this was all a mistake. The phone rang twice. Dad. His voice was breathless. It was not the cold, arrogant tone from the night before. It was thick with what sounded like relief. Dad, thank God. I have been tracking the truck's GPS. I saw you stopped at the house. Are you okay? Did she hurt you? I looked across the room. Maya was sitting on the floor now, her arms wrapped tight around the boy, Leo. They looked terrified. She didn't look like someone who could hurt a fly, let alone a man who had spent his life swinging sledgehammers. I am fine, Brandon, I said, keeping my voice low and neutral. I am inside the house. There was a pause on the line. I could hear wind rushing in the background, as if he was driving fast. Listen to me, Dad. You need to get out of there. Right now. Lock yourself in the truck and wait for me. I am 20 minutes away. Why, I asked. Why did you lie to me, Brandon? You said this place was a ruin. It is not. It is lived in. It is a trap, Dad. He said, his voice rising in pitch. That woman, Maya, she is a criminal, a professional con artist. We didn't want to tell you because we didn't want to tarnish Mom's memory. But you forced my hand. I gripped the phone tighter. The plastic creaked under the pressure of my hand. What are you talking about? She preyed on Mom, Brandon said, the words spilling out fast. She found out Mom was wealthy and lonely. She wormed her way into Mom's life, pretending to be a nurse, pretending to be a friend. It started with small loans, then it became extortion. She has been bleeding our family dry for 5 years, Dad. That is why the accounts are drained. It wasn't me making bad trades. It was her. It was blackmail. I listened to his words. They were smooth. They were logical. It was the perfect story. The vulnerable old woman. The young predator. It explained the money. It explained the secrecy. It explained why he wanted to sell the house so quickly to erase the shame. For a second, I almost believed him. It would be easier to believe him. It would mean my son wasn't a monster, just a victim trying to protect his mother's legacy. But then I looked up. Maya was whispering something to the boy, brushing the hair out of his eyes. As she moved her hand, the collar of her blouse shifted, and I saw it. It was a pendant resting against her collarbone. A deep blue sapphire surrounded by a halo of small diamonds on a delicate platinum chain. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. I knew that necklace. I knew exactly how much it cost, and exactly where I bought it. It was from a small jeweler in Savannah, Georgia. I had bought it for Evelyn for our 40th anniversary. I remembered the day I gave it to her. She had cried. She said it was the most beautiful thing she had ever owned. She said she would never take it off. And now it was around the neck of this stranger. I stared at it. My mind raced. If Maya was a blackmailer, she would have pawned that necklace. A grifter takes the cash and moves on. They don't wear the victim's sentimental jewelry. They certainly don't wear it while cowering in fear protecting a child. And there was something else. The way she wore it. She didn't wear it like a trophy. She wore it like a talisman. Like it was a piece of armor keeping her safe. Dad. "Are you there?" Brandon shouted through the phone, snapping me back to the present. "I am here," I said, my voice cold. "Did you hear me?" "She is dangerous. She has been brainwashing Mom for years. She probably told you some sob story about how I am the bad guy. That is what she does. She is a sociopath. She is wearing the sapphire necklace," I said. The line went silent. Dead silent. The wind noise stopped as if he had held his breath. "What?" "The necklace I gave your mother, the Savannah sapphire. She is wearing it, Brandon." There was a beat of hesitation, a crack in the performance. "She stole it," Brandon stammered. "I told you she is a thief. She stole everything." "No," I said slowly. "You don't understand. A thief sells. A thief converts assets to liquidity, just like you wanted to do with the house. She is wearing it right next to her heart." "Dad, listen to me." And the boy I interrupted. "He looks like you, Brandon. He has the Blake chin. He has my eyes. Is he part of the con too? Did she clone us?" "Harrison, stop!" He screamed it. The mask had slipped completely now. The concern was gone, replaced by pure panic. "Do not talk to her. Do not look at her. I have called the sheriff. They are almost there. They have orders to arrest her for trespassing and elder abuse. Just stay away from her until I get there." Elder abuse. The irony was so thick I could taste it. The only person abusing me was the one on the other end of the phone. I looked at Maya again. She had stopped whispering. She was looking at me, and she knew who I was talking to. There was no guile in her face, only a resignation that broke my heart. She looked like a woman who had been running for a long time and had finally hit a wall. "I am not going to lock myself in the truck, Brandon," I said. "I am going to stay right here. And I am going to ask her myself." "No, do not." I hung up. I placed the phone back in the cradle with a soft click. It felt final. I turned to face them. My hands were empty now. I had dropped the crowbar. I wasn't a threat anymore. I was just an old man with a lot of questions and very little time. Maya stood up, pulling the boy with her. She backed away until she hit the wall. "He is coming." "Isn't he?" she asked. Her voice was trembling. "Yes," I said. "And he called the cops?" she asked. "Yes." She closed her eyes. A single tear escaped and rolled down her cheek past the sapphire necklace. "He is going to take Leo," she whispered. "That is what he always said he would do. He said if I ever told anyone, he would take Leo and put me in jail. He said he has judges in his pocket. He said nobody would believe a caretaker over a hedge fund manager." I watched her. I watched the way her hands shook. "Brandon told me you were blackmailing Evelyn," I said. "He said you forced her to give you money." Maya opened her eyes. They flashed with anger. "I never asked her for a dime," she said fiercely. Evelyn offered. "She begged us to let her help. She said it was the only way she could sleep at night, knowing that her grandson wasn't starving, knowing that he was safe from his father." Her grandson. The word hung in the air. I looked at the boy. "Leo. My grandson." I took a step forward. Maya didn't flinch this time. "Why?" I asked. "Why didn't she tell me?" "Because she loved you," Maya said softly. "She knew what you would do. You are Harrison Blake. You have a code. If you knew what Brandon did, if you knew how Leo was conceived, you would have killed him, and then you would have gone to prison. Evelyn couldn't lose both of you, so she carried the burden alone." I felt the room sway. The weight of her words crushed me. Evelyn protecting me. Evelyn carrying a secret this heavy for 6 years, smiling at family dinners while hiding a whole other life. I opened my mouth to speak, but a sound from outside cut me off. It started faint, a low wail rising and falling on the wind. Then it got louder and louder. Sirens. Blue and red lights began to flash against the front window, cutting through the sheer curtains, painting the walls in a chaotic rhythm. "They are here," Maya whispered. She looked at Leo, and for the first time I saw a mother preparing to say goodbye. She knelt down and gripped his shoulders. "Leo, listen to me. No matter what happens, you don't say anything, okay? You just stay quiet." I looked at the flashing lights. I looked at the terrified woman and the confused child. And I looked at the sapphire necklace that my wife had given to the woman who saved her conscience. Brandon had sent the police to do his dirty work. He thought the badge would intimidate me. He thought the law was on his side. But he had forgotten one thing. This was my house. I walked over to the door. I picked up the crowbar. Not to use it as a weapon, but to hold it as a symbol. I wasn't going to let them take her. Not until I heard the whole story. The tires crunched on the gravel outside. Doors slammed. Voices shouted commands. I turned to Maya. "Go to the kitchen," I said. "Make some tea." She looked at me confused. "What?" I said, "Make tea. And cut a slice of that pie. We are going to have guests. And I am going to handle them." I turned back to the door and waited for the knock. My son wanted a war. He was about to get one. The tires crunching on gravel stopped and was replaced by the heavy thud of car doors slamming. I stood in the hallway with the crowbar in my hand, not raised in aggression, but held at my side like a walking stick. Maya was in the kitchen doorway holding a knife she had been using to cut the pie. Her knuckles were white. "Police, open up." The shout came from the front porch, accompanied by a heavy pounding on the mahogany door. They didn't wait for an answer. I heard the electronic lock beep the one I had broken, and then the door was kicked open. 2 deputies in tan uniforms burst in. Their hands were on their holsters. They saw me first, an old man with a crowbar. Then they saw Maya with the knife. "Drop the weapon, ma'am. Drop it now." Maya dropped the knife. It clattered on the tile floor. She raised her hands slowly. "I am not doing anything," she said, her voice trembling. "This is my home." The lead officer, a man with a thick neck and sunglasses, pushed past me. He didn't even look at me. He went straight for Maya. He grabbed her wrist and spun her around. "Maya Thorne, you are under arrest for criminal trespassing and extortion." He shoved her against the counter. The metal of the handcuffs clicked. It was a cold, harsh sound that echoed in the high-ceilinged room. No stop. The scream didn't come from Maya. It came from Leo. The little boy ran out from behind the kitchen island. He threw himself at the officer's leg, beating on the thick fabric of the uniform with his tiny fists. "Let her go, don't hurt my mommy." The officer looked down, annoyed. He tried to shake the boy off. "Get this kid off me." The second officer moved to grab Leo. I stood there frozen. In my head, I heard Brandon's voice on the phone. "She is a con artist, Dad. She is dangerous. If Brandon was right, then this was justice. This woman had manipulated my wife and stolen my money. She deserved to be in cuffs." I should step back. I should let the law do its job. I should go out to the truck and wait for my son to come and clean up this mess. But then the second officer grabbed Leo by the back of his shirt, pulling him away from his mother. Leo looked up at me. His face was wet with tears. His mouth was open in a silent scream of terror, and the light from the kitchen window hit his eyes. They were not brown like Maya's. They were not blue like Evelyn's. They were gray. A deep, smoky ash gray. My breath caught in my throat. I knew those eyes. I saw them every morning in the mirror for 70 years. I saw them in my father before me. They were the Blake eyes, a genetic trait so specific, so rare, that it had skipped Brandon entirely. But it hadn't skipped this boy. The world seemed to slow down. The shouting of the police faded. All I could see was that gray iris. Biology does not lie. Con artists can fake signatures. They can fake affection. They can fake deeds, but they cannot fake DNA. That boy was my blood, and that meant Maya wasn't a stranger. She was family. "Hey!" I shouted. The word tore out of my throat. I stepped forward, dropping the crowbar. It hit the floor with a heavy clang that made everyone jump. "Let the boy go," I commanded. The officer holding Leo hesitated. He looked at me, then at his partner. "Sir, step back," the lead officer said, tightening his grip on Maya. "We have orders from Mr. Brandon Blake. He has power of attorney. He says these people are squatters." "He does not have power of attorney," I said, walking into the kitchen. "I am Harrison Blake. I am the owner of this house, and I tore up that power of attorney 2 days ago." The officer sneered. "We will sort that out at the station. Right now she is coming with us." "Please." Maya cried out, twisting her head to look at me. Her eyes were desperate, pleading. In the drawer, she yelled. "The blue box in the utensil drawer. Look at it. Please, Harrison. For Evelyn." I looked at the drawer she was pointing to. It was the one where Evelyn used to keep the silverware. I moved toward it. "Sir, stay away from there," the officer warned, reaching for his taser. I ignored him. I pulled the drawer open. Amidst the spatulas and serving spoons, there was a small velvet box. It wasn't a jewelry box. It was a document box. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of heavy paper folded in thirds. I unfolded it. My hands were steady now. The anger had burned away the tremors. It was a notarized affidavit. I recognized the seal. It was from a notary in Boston, and at the bottom was a signature I would know anywhere. Elegant looping but slightly shaky from the arthritis she tried to hide. Evelyn Blake. I read the text. "I, Evelyn Blake, being of sound mind and body, hereby grant Maya Thorne and her son Leo Thorne full rights of residency at the property located at 124 Ocean Drive for the duration of their natural lives. This agreement is irrevocable and supersedes any future transfer of deed. It was dated 5 years ago. She didn't just let them stay. She gave them a life estate. She made sure that even if she died, they would be safe. She knew. Evelyn knew that one day Brandon would come for them, and she had prepared for it from the grave." I turned to the officer. I held the paper up. "Uncuff her," I said. The officer scoffed. "What is that?" "Some fake lease she printed off the internet." "It is a notarized affidavit signed by my late wife," I said, stepping into his personal space. "And unless you want to be sued for false arrest, unlawful imprisonment, and civil rights violations, you will take those cuffs off her right now." I shoved the paper in his face. He blinked, looking at the seal. He looked at the signature. He looked at me. He saw a man who wasn't backing down. A man who had built skyscrapers and stared down union bosses. He swallowed hard. He released his grip on Maya's arm. He fished the key from his belt and unlocked the cuffs. Maya rubbed her wrists, gasping for air. She immediately dropped to her knees and pulled Leo into her arms, rocking him back and forth. The officer stepped back, adjusting his belt, trying to regain his dignity. "This changes nothing," he muttered. "This is a civil matter now. But I am warning you, Mr. Blake. Your son called the sheriff directly. He is on his way down here with a court order. He says you are mentally incompetent. He says you are being held hostage." "I am not a hostage," I said, my voice ice cold. "I am home. Now get out of my house." The officers glared at me. They didn't like taking orders from an old man in a flannel shirt. But they knew they had lost this round. The paper was ironclad. "You are making a mistake," the lead officer said, pointing a finger at me. "That woman is trouble. Whatever she told you, it is a lie." I pointed at the door. "Out." They turned and marched out, leaving the front door hanging open on its broken hinges. I heard their car start up and crunch away down the driveway. Silence returned to the kitchen. But it was a heavy silence. The air was thick with adrenaline and fear. I looked down at Maya. She was still on the floor holding Leo. She was shaking. I looked at the paper in my hand. Evelyn's handwriting. It was like she was in the room with us. I walked over to the table and pulled out a chair. I sat down heavily. The exhaustion was finally catching up to me. The 10-hour drive. The confrontation. The shock. Maya stood up slowly. She lifted Leo, who buried his face in her neck. She walked over to the counter and poured a glass of water. Her hands were still trembling so much that water sloshed onto the floor. She drank it in one gulp. Then she turned to look at me. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't answer immediately. I watched Leo peeking out at me with those gray eyes. My eyes. "He is Brandon's, isn't he?" I asked. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Maya nodded. She didn't look away. "Yes," she said. "And Brandon knows. He knows." I closed my eyes. The pieces were falling into place. The desperation to sell the house. The panic when I said I was coming here. The lies about blackmail. He wasn't trying to save the estate money. He was trying to erase the evidence of his infidelity. He was trying to erase his own son. Why, I asked, opening my eyes. Why didn't he want him? Brandon and his wife. They have been trying to have a baby for 10 years. They spent thousands on fertility treatments. Why would he reject a healthy son? Maya laughed bitterly. She walked over to the table and sat opposite me. She put Leo on her lap. "Because I wasn't part of the plan, Harrison. I was an intern. I was nobody. And Brandon, he was running for partner at the firm. He was about to marry into the Vanderbilt family. A scandal like this, a child with the intern, it would have ruined his perfect image. It would have cost him the promotion. It would have cost him the marriage." "So he chose money," I said. "He chose power," Maya corrected. "He offered me $50,000 to get an abortion. When I refused, he threatened to make me disappear." I felt a chill run down my spine. Make me disappear. My son. The boy I taught to play catch. The boy I put through college. That was when Evelyn found out, Maya continued. She saw the messages on Brandon's phone. She came to find me. I thought she was coming to threaten me too, but she came to save me. She brought me here. She gave us this house. She gave us a life. And she gave me this necklace, she said, touching the sapphire pendant. She said it was the only clean thing in this family. The only thing given with real love. She wanted me to have it because she said I was the daughter she wished she had. I looked at the necklace. I remembered the night I put it around Evelyn's neck. I remembered how much I loved her. And I realized that in her own way, she had tried to fix the broken parts of our family. She couldn't fix Brandon, so she saved his victim. I reached across the table. I didn't touch Maya. I touched Leo's small hand. He flinched at first, but then he let me hold his fingers. They were small and warm. "The police said Brandon is coming," I said, "with a court order." Maya's face went pale again. "He will take him," she whispered. "He has lawyers. He has judges. He will declare you incompetent, Harrison. He will say I am a criminal. He will take Leo and I will never see him again." I squeezed Leo's hand. "No," I said. I stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. "He thinks he is coming to clear out a squatter and a senile old man," I said. "He thinks he is coming to win." I walked over to the kitchen drawer where I had seen a tool set earlier. I pulled out a screwdriver. "I am going to fix the lock on the front door," I said. "Then I am going to make some calls." Not to his lawyers, to mine, the real ones, the ones who haven't been bought. I turned to Maya. Is there any coffee left? She blinked, surprised by the shift in my tone. Yes, she said. In the pot. Pour me a cup, I said. Black. And get the boy a slice of that pie. We need energy. Why, she asked. Because I said, picking up the phone I had hung up earlier. When my son gets here, I want to be wide awake. I want to look him in the eye when I destroy him. The kitchen was quiet now, but it was the kind of silence that feels like a held breath before a scream. The police officers were gone, but their presence still lingered like a bad smell. Maya was clearing the table, her movements jerky and fast. She was avoiding my eyes. She treated me not like an enemy anymore, but like a bomb that could go off at any moment. I watched Leo. The boy was sitting at the kitchen island, finishing the last crumbs of the apple pie. He was swinging his legs back and forth, his heels bumping against the wood in a steady rhythm. It was a rhythmic thud, thud, thud that echoed the pounding of my own heart. I took a sip of the black coffee Maya had poured me. It was strong and bitter, just the way I liked it, just the way Evelyn used to make it. So I said, keeping my voice soft so I wouldn't startle the boy, "You said his father is dead." Maya froze near the sink. She didn't turn around. She scrubbed a plate with unnecessary force. "Yes," she said. Her voice was flat, hard. "Was it an accident?" I asked. "Or was he sick?" "He is just dead." "Harrison," she snapped. "Drop it." She turned off the faucet, and the sudden silence was jarring. She grabbed a dish towel and dried her hands. "Come on, Leo," she said, her voice softening instantly as she looked at her son. "It is time for a bath. You have sticky apple filling all over your face." I watched them. I watched the way Leo slid off the high stool. And that was when I saw it. A small detail. A tiny insignificance that would have meant nothing to anyone else but meant everything to me. Leo reached for his glass of milk. He didn't use his right hand. He used his left. He gripped the glass awkwardly, his pinky finger sticking out slightly. And as he concentrated on not spilling it, his eyebrows pulled together in a deep V shape. A vertical crease appeared right between his eyes. I felt a ghost walk over my grave. I had seen that frown 1,000 times. I had seen it 40 years ago at a kitchen table in Boston. I saw it every time Brandon struggled with his math homework. I saw it every time he tried to build a tower of blocks and they fell down. The left-handed grip, the furrowed brow, the jut of the chin when he was determined. It wasn't just the eyes. It was the mannerisms. Biology is a stubborn thing. It writes its signature in the way we walk, the way we smile, and the way we hold a glass of milk. That boy was not just a stranger with gray eyes. He was a carbon copy of my son. I waited until they left the kitchen. I heard their footsteps on the stairs. I heard the water running in the upstairs bathtub. I heard Maya singing a low lullaby. I moved. I moved with a speed that defied my 70 years. I went to the pantry and grabbed a box of Ziploc sandwich bags. I pulled one out and shoved it in my pocket. Then I went upstairs. The door to the main bathroom was open a crack, but the steam was pouring out. I could hear Leo splashing and laughing. Maya was distracted. I slipped past the door and went into the smaller guest bathroom at the end of the hall. This was clearly the one the boy used. There was a step stool by the sink. There were rubber ducks lined up on the counter. And there, in a ceramic cup, was a toothbrush. It was small and blue with a cartoon superhero on the handle. The bristles were frayed from use. I didn't hesitate. I couldn't afford to hesitate. I reached out with a handkerchief from my pocket so I wouldn't contaminate it and grabbed the toothbrush. I slipped it into the plastic bag and sealed it tight. I felt like a thief. I felt dirty. I was stealing from a child in my own house. But I needed proof. I needed something that would stand up in a court of law. something that would silence Brandon's lies forever. I put the bag in my inside jacket pocket right next to my heart. I went back downstairs and out onto the front porch. The night air was cool and smelled of impending rain. The ocean was churning loudly in the distance. I pulled out the burner phone I kept in the truck for emergencies. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Leonard Katz picked up on the second ring. He was 80 years old and had been my lawyer since I poured my first foundation. He was the only man in Boston I trusted. "Harrison," he said, his voice gravelly with sleep. "It is 10 o'clock. Where the hell are you? Brandon has been calling the office every 10 minutes. He says you have been kidnapped." "I am not kidnapped, Leonard," I said, looking out at the dark driveway. "I am at the beach house, and I found something. Or rather, someone." I told him. I told him about the house, about Maya, about the boy with the gray eyes and the left-handed grip. Leonard was silent for a long time. "Harrison," he said finally, "that is a heavy accusation. If you are wrong—" "I am not wrong, Leonard. I feel it in my gut. But I need you to prove it. I have a DNA sample, a toothbrush. I am going to drive to the 24-hour courier service in town and overnight it to the lab in Boston. I need you to authorize the rush processing. I want results by tomorrow afternoon." "You really think Brandon would do this?" Leonard asked. "You think he would hide a child?" I thought about the fear in Maya's eyes. I thought about the desperate front Brandon tried to stop me from coming here. "Yes," I said. "I think he would do anything to protect his image." "Even erase his own blood, send it," Leonard said. "I will make the call to the lab." "But Harrison, watch your back. If Brandon is desperate enough to hide a child, he is desperate enough to do other things." "I know," I said. I hung up. I walked down the steps toward my truck to drive to the courier, but I never made it to the truck. High beams cut through the darkness, blinding me. A powerful engine roared over the sound of the ocean. Tires crunched violently on the gravel, sending stones flying. A black vehicle swerved into the driveway, bypassing the broken gate. It wasn't a police car. It was a massive black Range Rover with tinted windows. It looked like a hearse designed for war. It skid to a halt just 10 feet from where I stood, blocking my path to my truck. The doors opened. Brandon stepped out. He wasn't wearing his suit anymore. He was wearing dark jeans and a black jacket. He looked younger and more dangerous. He didn't come alone. From the passenger side, Tiffany stepped out, looking nervous, clutching her purse. And from the back seat, 2 men emerged. They were big. They wore ill-fitting suits and had the thick necks of men who hurt people for a living. They weren't police, they were private security, or maybe just hired muscle. Brandon looked at me. The headlights backlit him, casting a long shadow that stretched all the way to the front door of the house. "Dad," he said. His voice was calm, too calm. He walked toward me, stopping just out of reach. He looked at the house, then back at me. "You look tired, Dad. You are confused. You don't know what you are doing." I put my hand over my chest, feeling the crinkle of the plastic bag in my pocket. "The evidence." "I know exactly what I am doing, Brandon," I said. He sighed. He shook his head like a disappointed parent. "No, you don't. But that is okay. We are here to take you home, and we are here to clean up this mess." He gestured to the 2 men. "Get him in the car, and then clear the house." The 2 men stepped forward. I gripped the railing of the porch. I wasn't going anywhere. And neither was that toothbrush. "You step 1 foot on this porch," I warned, "and you will regret it." Brandon laughed. It was a cold sound that was swallowed by the wind. "Regret is for people who lose Dad. And I don't lose." He signaled the men again, and the war for the house began. The heavy oak door swung open, crashing against the wall with a violence that made the crystal chandelier in the foyer tremble. The sound was like a gunshot, shattering the fragile peace we had tried to build in the kitchen. I stood my ground, gripping the back of the dining chair, my knuckles turning white. I watched as my son stepped over the threshold of the house I built. He was not the Brandon I knew. He was not the nervous executive who had paced around my living room in Boston, feigning concern for my health. That man had vanished. In his place stood a stranger in a tailored black suit that cost more than most people earn in a year. His eyes were cold, devoid of any warmth or recognition. He moved with the predatory grace of a shark entering bloodied water. Behind him trailed Tiffany. She was wrapped in a faux fur coat, clutching her designer bag to her chest like a shield. Her face was twisted in a grimace of distaste, as if she had just stepped into a sewer rather than a beachfront estate. And then there were the others, 2 men. They were mountains of muscle squeezed into cheap suits that strained at the shoulders. They wore earpieces, and their eyes scanned the room, not admiring the architecture, but assessing threats. They were not law enforcement. They were mercenaries, hired muscle paid to clean up messes that money alone could not fix. Brandon did not look at me. He did not look at the photo of his mother on the mantel. He walked straight toward the kitchen island where Maya stood shielding Leo with her body. The sound of his dress shoes clicking on the hardwood floor was the only sound in the room. Click, click, click. A countdown to destruction. He stopped 3 feet from Maya. He looked down at her with a mixture of boredom and contempt. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He didn't hand it to her. He tossed it onto the granite countertop. It landed with a heavy thud sliding across the surface and coming to rest next to the half-eaten apple pie. $50,000, Brandon said. His voice was flat, transactional. Maya stared at the envelope, then up at him. She didn't move. Take it, Brandon said. It is all there in non-consecutive bills. Take the brat, take your clothes, and get out of my sight before I change my mind and call immigration instead of a taxi. Tiffany stepped up beside him, wrinkling her nose as she looked around the kitchen. She picked up a toy car from the floor with 2 fingers holding it like it was radioactive waste. God, it smells in here, she said. It smells like sour milk and cheap diapers. How could Mom stand it? It is disgusting. She dropped the toy. It clattered loudly on the floor. Leo flinched. He buried his face deeper into Maya's stomach. I felt a heat rise in my chest that had nothing to do with my blood pressure. It was a primal rage, a protective instinct that I hadn't felt since my children were small. But now I wasn't protecting them. I was protecting my family from them. I stepped away from the table. I moved deliberately, placing myself between Brandon and Maya. I stood tall, pulling my 70-year-old frame to its full height. I looked my son in the eye. Pick it up, I said. Brandon blinked slowly, shifting his gaze to me for the first time. He looked amused. Pick what up, Dad? The money, I said, pointing at the envelope. Pick it up and apologize to this woman, and then explain to me why you are threatening the mother of your child in the house your mother gave them. Brandon laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. He shook his head and looked at Tiffany. See, he said. I told you. Complete dementia. He is imagining things. He thinks this squatter is family. He turned back to me, his smile vanishing. There is no child, Dad. There is just a woman who took advantage of a lonely old lady. And now I am fixing it. I am doing what you are too weak to do. He reached out to push past me. I didn't let him. I grabbed his arm. My grip was strong, honed by decades of swinging hammers and hauling lumber. I dug my fingers into the expensive fabric of his suit. I said no. I growled. Nobody is going anywhere until I get the truth. I saw the boy Brandon. I saw his eyes. I have the DNA sample in my pocket. You can lie to the police. You can lie to your shareholders. But you cannot lie to me. Brandon looked at my hand on his arm. His face darkened. The veneer of civilization cracked. "Let go of me, old man," he hissed. "You are afraid," I said, tightening my grip. "You are terrified that your little world is going to crumble. You are afraid that your wife will find out you have a son. You are afraid the board will find out you are a fraud." Brandon ripped his arm away. He took a step back, smoothing his jacket. He took a deep breath, composing himself. When he looked up again, his eyes were dead. "You leave me no choice," he said quietly. He snapped his fingers. The two mountains of muscle stepped forward. The air in the room seemed to get thinner. "Dr. Aris was right," Brandon said, addressing the room at large. "My father is having an episode. He is violent. He is confused. He is a danger to himself and others." He pointed at me. "Escort Mr. Blake to the master bedroom. Lock the door. Make sure he doesn't hurt himself." "What?" Tiffany gasped. "You can't just lock him up." "He has a gun, Tiffany." Brandon snapped. "He waved a shotgun at the police earlier. Do you want him to shoot someone? Do you want him to go to prison?" "I am trying to protect him." He looked at the guards. "Do it." The first guard moved toward me. "Sir, please come with us," he rumbled, his voice like gravel. I backed up until I hit the kitchen counter. I looked around for a weapon. The crowbar was in the hallway, too far to reach. The knife was on the floor, kicked away by the police. "I am not going anywhere," I shouted. "This is my house." The guard didn't listen. He reached out with a hand the size of a shovel and grabbed my shoulder. I swung at him. It was a clumsy punch fueled by desperation, but it connected with his jaw. He didn't even flinch. He just looked at me with pity. "Sorry, sir," he said. He grabbed my other arm. The second guard moved in, grabbing my waist. They lifted me off the ground as if I were a child. "Put me down!" I roared, kicking and thrashing. "Brandon, tell them to stop!" Brandon turned his back on me. He walked toward Maya, who was now backed into the corner, holding a screaming Leo. "Take him upstairs," Brandon said over his shoulder, "and keep him there. I need to have a private conversation with our guest." I watched helpless as the distance between me and my grandson grew. I saw Maya's eyes widen in terror as Brandon loomed over her. I saw the shark smile return to his face. "No!" I screamed, my voice raw. "Don't you touch them!" The guards hauled me into the hallway. They dragged me up the stairs, my boots thumping against the steps I had built with my own hands. They didn't care about my dignity. They didn't care about the law. They were following orders, and the man giving the orders was the one signing the checks. They threw me into the master bedroom. I stumbled and fell onto the rug. The door slammed shut. I heard the lock turn. Click. Then I heard the sound of heavy furniture being dragged across the hall floor, blocking the door from the outside. I scrambled to my feet. I pounded on the wood with my fists. "Let me out!" "Brandon!" Silence answered me. Then from downstairs I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. It was the sound of a child crying out in pain and then being suddenly silenced. I pressed my ear to the door. "I am going to make you an offer." Brandon's voice drifted up, muffled but audible through the floorboards. "And this time you are going to take it, or the boy disappears." I looked around the room. I was trapped. My son was downstairs threatening to murder my grandson, and I was locked in a gilded cage. I looked at the window. It was a 20-foot drop to the concrete patio below. I didn't care. I walked to the window and unlatched it. The wind howled outside, angry and wild. "You think you have won, Brandon," I whispered to the storm. "You think you have silenced me." I climbed onto the sill. "But you forgot one thing. I built this house, and I know every weakness in its structure, and I know exactly how to bring it down on top of you. The room was dark save for the moonlight slicing through the sheer curtains. I was sitting on the floor of the master bedroom, my back pressed against the heavy oak door that my son had just locked from the outside. The sounds from downstairs drifted up through the floorboards like the whispers of ghosts. I heard the crash of porcelain shattering against a wall. I heard Tiffany shrieking something about contamination. I heard the heavy thud of boots on the hardwood. But the worst sound was the silence that followed. I pressed my ear against the wood, straining to hear Leo's voice. I wanted to hear him cry because crying meant he was still alive. Crying meant he was safe enough to feel fear. But there was nothing. Just the low murmur of Brandon's voice, a sound as smooth and poisonous as oil. I squeezed my eyes shut. I was 70 years old. I was a man who had commanded construction sites with hundreds of workers. I was a man who could look at a blueprint and see a skyscraper. And yet here I was, locked in my own bedroom, while my son dismantled my legacy and threatened the only innocent blood left in my lineage. I looked around the room. It was exactly as Evelyn had left it. Her perfume, a scent of lavender and old paper, still lingered in the air. The bed was made with the military precision she insisted on. The vanity table was covered in a layer of dust, but her silver hairbrush was still there, waiting for a hand that would never hold it again. I felt a wave of nausea. I had failed her. I had failed to protect her when she was alive, and now I was failing to protect the family she had died saving. I pushed myself up. My knees popped and a sharp pain shot up my lower back. I walked to the window. It was a straight drop to the concrete patio. Even if I survived the fall, I would be crippled. I would be useless to Maya and the boy. I turned back to the room. There had to be something. A weapon. A tool. Anything. And then I heard it. Not a sound from the room, but a sound from my memory. It was Evelyn's voice. It was weak, breathy, the voice of a woman whose lungs were slowly failing her. It was 3 days before she died. We were in the hospital room in Boston. The machines were beeping that rhythmic countdown to the end. She had grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so frail. "Harrison," she had whispered. "I am here, Evie," I had said, leaning close. "If you ever feel lost," she said, her eyes focusing on something far away. "If you ever feel cold and alone, go to the place where we were happiest and find the warmth." I thought she was speaking in metaphors. I thought she was talking about memories, about the warmth of our love. I thought she was hallucinating from the morphine. "Find the warmth, Harrison. It is in the hearth." The hearth. I looked at the fireplace on the far wall. It was a beautiful piece of masonry built with river stones I had handpicked myself. We hadn't lit a fire in there for 20 years. It was cold, dark, and empty. But Evelyn didn't speak in riddles. She was a practical woman. She kept the books for my company for 3 decades. She knew where every penny went. She knew where everything was hidden. I moved toward the fireplace. My legs felt heavy as if I were wading through concrete. I knelt down on the hearthrug. The stones were cold against my palms. Find the warmth. I looked inside the firebox. It was clean. No soot, just bare brick. I reached in, running my hand along the back wall. The bricks were rough, scratching my skin. I felt nothing, just mortar and stone. A panic rose in my chest. Was I crazy? Was I just a senile old man chasing the hallucinations of a dying woman? Maybe Brandon was right. Maybe I had lost my mind. Then my fingers brushed against something on the floor of the fireplace. It was the 3rd brick from the left on the bottom row. It sat slightly higher than the others. Imperceptibly so, unless you were the man who laid it. I remembered laying this hearth. I remembered Evelyn standing behind me, watching me work. She had asked me to leave a loose brick. She said she wanted a place to hide her diary so the kids wouldn't find it. We had laughed about it. A secret for a teenager. I dug my fingernails into the edge of the brick. I pulled. It didn't move. I gritted my teeth. I put both hands on it, ignoring the tremors in my fingers. I pulled until I felt a nail tear. I pulled until the muscles in my forearms burned. With a grinding sound of stone on stone, the brick slid forward. I pulled it out and set it on the rug. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would burst. I reached into the dark cavity. My hand closed around something cold and metallic. I pulled it out. It was a key. A small silver key with a complex, jagged edge. It wasn't a house key. It was a safe key. I stared at it. Evelyn didn't just hide a diary. She hid a way to access something much more important. But where was the safe? We didn't have a wall safe in the beach house, at least not one I knew about. I looked around the room again. The walls were covered in wallpaper. There were no obvious panels. Then I looked at the painting above the mantel. It was a seascape, a painting of the lighthouse at Cape Hatteras. Evelyn loved that painting. She bought it from a local artist on our 10th anniversary. It was heavy. It was large. And it had hung there for 25 years. I stood up, clutching the key. I stepped onto the raised hearth. I reached up and grabbed the gilded frame. It was heavier than I remembered. I lifted it off the hook. My arms shook under the weight. I lowered it carefully to the floor, leaning it against the wall. Behind the painting, the wallpaper was cut. A perfect square. I peeled back the flap of wallpaper. There it was. A small steel safe embedded in the drywall. It looked new, much newer than the house. Evelyn must have had it installed years ago, probably by a contractor she hired without telling me. I inserted the silver key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click. I pulled the handle. The heavy steel door swung open. The safe wasn't empty. Inside there were two things: a thick leather-bound notebook and a silver USB drive. I took them out. My hands were shaking so bad now that I almost dropped the drive. I sat back down on the rug, the cold draft from the fireplace hitting my back. I put the USB drive in my pocket. That was the evidence Brandon was terrified of. That was the money laundering, the fraud, the stolen millions. That was the weapon I would use to destroy him. But the notebook, that was the weapon that would destroy me. I ran my hand over the leather cover. It was worn soft from use. I opened it. The handwriting was unmistakably Evelyn's. But it wasn't the neat, organized script she used for accounting. It was jagged, rushed, frantic. I flipped past the first few pages. They were dates, doctor appointments, notes about Maya's pregnancy, receipts for cash withdrawals. I turned to the very last entry. It was dated 2 weeks before she died. The ink was smudged as if she had been crying while she wrote it. I started to read. My dearest Harrison, if you are reading this, then I am gone. And if you have found this key, it means you finally came back to the ocean. It means you met them. I know you are angry. I know you feel betrayed. You think I hid them from you because I didn't trust you. You think I lied because I didn't love you. But you are wrong. I didn't hide Leo to protect Brandon. I hid him to protect you. Do you remember the summer of '98? Do you remember when that man broke into the construction site and stole the equipment? Do you remember what you did to him? You nearly beat him to death, Harrison. You have a fire in you, a rage that burns for justice. It is what made you a great builder, but it is also what scares me. If you knew what Brandon did to that girl, if you knew he forced himself on her, if you knew he sent men to hurt her, to kill the baby, you wouldn't have called the police. You would have killed him. I know you. You would have taken your shotgun and you would have ended your own son to save your honor. And then you would have gone to prison. and I would have lost my husband and my son in the same day. I couldn't live with that. So I became a liar. I bought your freedom with my silence. I bought Leo's life with my secrets. Brandon thinks this drive contains proof of his financial crimes. And it does. But it also contains the recording. The recording from the night he came here and confessed everything to me, thinking I was too sick to do anything about it. He is a monster, Harrison. But he is our monster. I couldn't destroy him. But I know you can. You have to be the one to decide. Forgive me for the lies. I just wanted to keep you safe. I love you more than the sea loves the shore. Evelyn. The book fell from my hands. I sat there on the cold floor, tears streaming down my face, soaking into the flannel shirt. She knew. She knew everything. She knew I was a violent man when pushed. She knew I would have chosen blood for blood. She sacrificed her own peace of mind to keep my hands clean, and now the choice was mine. I heard a thud from downstairs, a heavy object hitting the floor. Then a scream. It was Maya. "No, you can't take him!" I wiped the tears from my face. I stood up. The pain in my knees was gone. The tremors in my hands were gone. I wasn't just an old man anymore. I was the man Evelyn was afraid of, and I was the man she was counting on. I put the notebook in my pocket next to the USB drive. I walked to the door. I looked at the heavy dresser blocking it from the outside. I didn't need a key to get out of this room. I needed momentum. I backed up to the window. I took a deep breath. "I am coming, Evie," I whispered. I ran. I threw my shoulder against the oak door with every ounce of strength left in my body. I was going to break the door down, and then I was going to break my son. The leather of the diary felt cold and heavy in my hands, like I was holding a living thing that was holding its breath. The room was silent, except for the wind howling outside, rattling the window panes, as if trying to warn me about what I was about to read. I sat there on the rug with my back against the wall, the open safe gaping like a wound behind the painting. My hands, which had been so steady when I broke the gate, were shaking again. I was afraid. I was not afraid of my son or his hired thugs. I was afraid of the truth. I was afraid that once I read these words, I would never be able to look at the world the same way again. I turned the page. The date was written in the top corner. October 14th, 7 years ago. I remembered that autumn. It was the year Brandon made partner at his firm. It was the year he bought the penthouse in Beacon Hill. We threw him a party. I remembered toasting to his success. I remembered telling him I was proud of him. I looked down at the page. The handwriting was Evelyn's, but it wasn't the graceful script she used for her garden club invitations. It was jagged. The ink was smeared in places, as if she had been weeping while she wrote. "I am writing this because I don't know who else to tell," the entry began. "And I cannot tell Harrison. God forgive me, I cannot tell my husband." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to read on. Brandon came to me tonight. He was drunk. He was shaking. I thought he was sick. I thought he was in trouble with the law. But it was worse. Much worse. He told me about the girl, the intern, Maya. The name jumped off the page. Maya. He said it was a mistake. He said he was stressed. He said she led him on. But as I listened to him, as I watched my son try to justify the unjustifiable, I saw the truth in his eyes. He didn't just have an affair, Harrison. He took her. He forced himself on her in his office after everyone else had gone home. He committed a crime against a girl who looked up to him. I felt a wave of nausea roll through my gut. My son, a rapist. The word felt foreign and foul in my mind. I thought about the way he wore his suits, the way he spoke at charity galas. It was all a costume, a mask, hiding a predator. I read on. The entry got darker. But the assault wasn't the reason he came to me. He came because she is pregnant. And he has a solution. He told me he hired a man, a cleaner. He wants to make the problem go away. He wants to kill the baby. And if Maya doesn't cooperate, he implied she might have an accident too. He said he has to protect his career. He said he has to protect the family name. I stopped breathing. My vision blurred. A hitman. My son had planned a double murder to save his reputation. I slapped him, Evelyn wrote. I slapped my own son. I told him if he touched a hair on her head, I would go to the police myself. I told him I would ruin him. But he just laughed. He said nobody would believe a senile old woman over a pillar of the community. So I made a choice that breaks my heart. I went to find the girl myself. I got to her before his men did. I offered her sanctuary. I brought her here to the beach house. I promised her safety. I promised her that as long as I am alive, Brandon will never touch her or the child. I wiped the tears from my cheeks. Evelyn. My brave, gentle Evelyn. She had turned this house into a fortress. She had saved 2 lives while I was busy building skyscrapers in Boston, oblivious to the rot in my own bloodline. I turned the page. I know why I can't tell Harrison, she wrote. I know my husband. He is a good man, but he has a temper that sleeps deep inside him. The beast. If he knew what Brandon did, if he knew his son was a rapist and a potential murderer, he wouldn't call the police. He would take his shotgun, and he would handle it the old way. He would kill Brandon, and then he would go to prison for the rest of his life. I cannot lose my son and my husband in the same tragedy. So I will carry this burden alone. I will be the liar so Harrison can stay the hero. I closed the book. I pressed it against my forehead. She knew me better than I knew myself. She was right. If she had told me 7 years ago, I would have buried him. She sacrificed her own peace. She let me believe she was distant. She let me believe she was abandoning me just to keep my hands clean of our son's blood. I looked at the USB drive sitting on the carpet. It was small, silver, innocuous. I opened the diary again, flipping to the back where a folded piece of paper was tucked in. It was a list of bank accounts and routing numbers, and a note. The house is not just a sanctuary, the note read. It is a vault. Brandon thinks I only know about the girl. But I dug deeper. I hired a forensic accountant. The money he uses to pay off his gambling debts. The money he uses to maintain his lifestyle. It is not his earnings. He has been siphoning from the company pension fund. I froze. The pension fund? He stole $3 million from the retirement accounts of the construction workers, Evelyn wrote. The men you worked with for 40 years. The men who trust you. He emptied it, Harrison. And he thinks he buried the evidence. He thinks if he sells this house, he can use the proceeds to plug the hole before the audit next month. He says he needs to sell the property to liquidate assets, but the truth is he needs to destroy the foundation. He buried the hard drives from his office under the concrete slab of the guest house extension last year. He needs to dig them up and destroy them before anyone looks too close. The rage that filled me now was different. It wasn't the hot flash of violence. It was a cold, absolute certainty. He didn't just hurt a woman. He didn't just betray his family. He stole the future of the men who built his inheritance. Men with calloused hands and aching backs who trusted Harrison Blake to keep their retirement safe. He stole from Joe the foreman. He stole from Sam the electrician. He stole from the widows of the men who died on my sites. He was not my son. He was a parasite. I stood up. I put the diary in my left pocket and the USB drive in my right pocket. I buttoned the flannel shirt over them. I felt heavy. Not with age, but with purpose. I looked at the door. The furniture was still piled against it from the outside. I could hear muffled shouting downstairs. I needed to get out. I needed to get this evidence to Leonard. I needed to end this. I looked around for something to break the door. But before I could move, the handle jiggled violently. Something heavy slammed against the wood from the hallway side. Once. Twice. Wood splintered. The heavy dresser on the other side was being shoved away. The door flew open with a crash that shook the walls. Brandon stood in the doorway. He was out of breath. His hair was disheveled. His tie was crooked. He looked wild, desperate. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking past me. He was looking at the empty safe. He was looking at the painting on the floor. His eyes widened. The color drained from his face, leaving it the color of old ash. He stepped into the room. He saw the empty space where the diary had been. He saw the empty space where the USB drive had been. Then he looked at me. His chest was heaving. He licked his lips. "You found it," he whispered. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of doom. He took a step toward me. His hands were opening and closing at his sides. "Give it to me, Dad," he said. His voice was shaking. "You don't know what you have. You don't understand the complexity." "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice steady and low. "I understand rape. I understand attempted murder. And I understand $3 million of stolen pension money." Brandon flinched as if I had struck him. "It was just business," he screamed, his voice cracking. "I was going to put it back. I just needed time. And the girl, she was nothing. She was nobody." He lunged at me. "Give it to me!" He wasn't a smooth executive anymore. He was a cornered rat. He closed the distance between us, reaching for my pockets, reaching for the only thing that could save his miserable life. I didn't back down. I didn't run to the window. I planted my feet. I clenched my fists. "I am 70 years old, Brandon," I said. "But I am still the man who built this house. And I am about to show you what happens when you try to tear down a foundation." He threw a punch. I caught it. I caught his fist in my open palm. The impact stung, but my hand did not yield. I wrapped my fingers around his knuckles and squeezed. I felt the small, fragile bones of his hand grind together. Brandon gasped, his eyes widening in shock. He had forgotten. He had forgotten that while he spent his days typing on keyboards and signing papers, I spent 40 years gripping hammer handles and hauling rebar. My strength was not gym muscle. It was functional. It was permanent. I twisted his wrist and shoved him backward. He stumbled, tripping over his own expensive Italian shoes and crashing into the vanity table. Perfume bottles rattled and fell. "You are weak, Brandon," I said, my voice low and steady. "You have always been weak. You think money is strength. You think lying is strategy. But when you strip all that away, you are just a frightened little boy who broke something he couldn't fix." Brandon scrambled to his feet. His face was red, blotchy with rage and humiliation. He didn't look like my son anymore. He looked like a stranger. He looked like a cornered animal baring its teeth. "Give it to me," he screamed. He wasn't asking anymore. He was demanding. He pointed a shaking finger at my pocket, where the USB drive and the diary were burning a hole against my chest. "You don't understand, Dad. You are so self-righteous. You think the world is black and white, but it is not. It is gray. I did it for the company. I did it for the family. For the family," I repeated. "You stole $3 million from the pension fund for the family. You raped an intern for the family. You tried to murder your own unborn son for the family." Brandon flinched, but he didn't back down. "I needed liquidity. The market turned against me. I was going to put it back. Once I sold this house, once I liquidated the assets, I was going to pay back every cent to the pension fund. Nobody would have known. I was saving the Blake legacy. You were saving your own skin," I shouted. Brandon wiped spit from his mouth. He took a step toward me, his eyes wild. "Give me the drive, old man. I am not asking. I need to destroy it. If the auditors see that if the FBI sees that it is over, I go to jail. Do you want that? Do you want your son in a cage? Do you want the name Harrison Blake dragged through the mud?" I looked at him. I looked at the sweat dripping down his forehead. I looked at the desperation in his eyes. And I felt nothing. The love I had for him and the pride I had carried for 40 years had evaporated, leaving only a cold, hard resolve. "The name is already in the mud." "Brandon," I said, "you put it there, and now I am going to clean it off." I turned my back on him. I walked toward the bed. Brandon roared. He lunged at me again, thinking I was defenseless, thinking I was retreating. But I wasn't retreating. I dropped to one knee. I reached under the heavy oak bed frame. My fingers brushed against cold steel. The Remington shotgun. I had kicked it under there the moment the bodyguards dragged me into the room, hoping they wouldn't check. They had been too focused on locking the door to search the room. It was a gamble, and it had paid off. I grabbed the stock. I spun around on my knee. Brandon was 3 feet away, his hands reaching for my throat. I racked the slide. Clack, clack. The sound was unmistakable. It was the universal sound of a conversation ending. Brandon froze mid-step. His hands hovered in the air. His eyes went from my face to the black barrel pointing at his chest. He took a stumbling step back. His breathing came in shallow gasps. "Dad," he whispered. "Dad, don't. Put it down. It is me. It is Brandon." I stood up slowly, keeping the barrel leveled at his heart. "I don't know who you are," I said. "Brandon died a long time ago. The man standing in front of me is a thief and a predator." Brandon raised his hands, showing his palms. He was trembling violently now. "You won't shoot," he said, his voice shaking. "You can't. I am your flesh and blood. You are not a killer." I tightened my finger on the trigger. I thought about Maya. I thought about the fear in her eyes. I thought about the little boy downstairs with the gray eyeballs and the left-handed grip. "You are right," I said. "I am not a killer, but I am a protector. And right now I am protecting the only innocent thing left in this house." Suddenly, the door behind Brandon burst open. The 2 bodyguards rushed in. They had heard the shouting. They saw me with the gun, and their training kicked in. They reached into their jackets, reaching for their own weapons. "Drop it!" the first one yelled. "Drop the weapon!" Brandon's confidence snapped back. He smirked. "See, Dad," he said. "It is over. Put it down before you get hurt." He took a step toward me, reaching for the gun barrel. I didn't hesitate. I didn't flinch. I tilted the barrel up 6 inches and pulled the trigger. Boom! The explosion was deafening in the enclosed space. It wasn't a warning shot fired into the air outside. It was a roar of thunder inside the house. The ceiling above Brandon's head exploded. Plaster and drywall rained down in a white cloud. Dust filled the air instantly, choking and thick. Brandon screamed and dropped to the floor, covering his head with his arms. From out in the hallway, I heard a high-pitched shriek. Tiffany. She was screaming in pure terror. The bodyguards froze. They stopped reaching for their guns. They looked at the hole in the ceiling, then at me. They saw the smoke curling from the barrel. They saw the look in my eyes. They realized I wasn't bluffing. They realized that for $70 an hour, dying wasn't part of their contract. "Stay back!" I roared, my voice cutting through the ringing in our ears. "The next one is buckshot, and I won't aim for the ceiling." I racked the slide again. Clack, clack. A fresh shell loaded into the chamber. "Get out!" I shouted at the bodyguards. "Get out of my house!" They looked at Brandon cowering on the floor, covered in white dust. Then they looked at each other. They nodded. They backed out of the room, hands raised, palms open. I looked down at my son. He was curled into a ball, weeping. "You are crazy," he sobbed. "You are insane." "No," I said, looking down at him. "I am just finally seeing clearly." In the sudden silence following the gunshot, a sound cut through the room. Buzz, buzz. It was against my chest. The vibration was strong, insistent. I kept the gun trained on Brandon with one hand. With the other, I reached into my flannel shirt pocket. I pulled out my phone. The screen lit up in the dusty gloom. It was a text message from Leonard Katz. I glanced at it quickly. DNA. Result: 99.9% match. Paternity confirmed. I have forwarded the file to the FBI field office in Charlotte. They are 10 minutes out. Sit tight, Harrison. Justice is coming. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. A weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't senile. I was right. I looked at the phone, then at Brandon. I smiled. It was a cold, grim smile. "Get up," I said to him. Brandon looked up, wiping dust and tears to his face. "What?" he stammered. I said, "Get up. You wanted to save the company, right? You wanted to save your reputation." I turned the phone screen toward him so he could see the message. "Well, you are too late." Brandon squinted. He read the words. DNA match. FBI. His jaw dropped. The blood drained from his face, leaving him looking like a ghost. He made a sound, a strangled whimper of defeat. "They are 10 minutes away," I said. "So if I were you, I would spend those 10 minutes thinking about how you are going to explain to a federal agent why you tried to sell a house to cover up a felony." Brandon slumped back against the wall. He looked small. He looked broken. I stepped over him. I walked to the door. "Where are you going?" he whispered. "I am going downstairs," I said, racking the shotgun one last time for emphasis. "I have a grandson to apologize to, and I have a family to protect until the cavalry arrives." I walked out of the bedroom, leaving my son sitting in the ruins of the ceiling and the ruins of his life. I shoved the crumpled letter deep into the pocket of my jeans. My hand was trembling, not from the Parkinson's this time, but from a cold, simmering rage. Through the screen door, I watched Maya laughing in the kitchen as she wiped flour off Leo's nose. They looked so peaceful, so unaware that the storm hadn't just passed. It had merely changed direction. "Who was it, Harrison?" Maya called out, her voice cheerful. "Just junk mail," I lied. "Real estate agents wanting to buy the house. Vultures." It was the first lie I had told her, and it tasted like ash in my mouth. But it was a necessary lie. A protector doesn't burden his family with fear. He burdens himself with the strategy to eliminate it. That night, after the house fell silent, and the only sound was the rhythmic crashing of the waves against the shore, I didn't go to sleep. I went down to the basement. This house was my fortress, but a fortress is only as good as its commander. I checked the window latches. I double-checked the reinforced deadbolts I had installed the week before. I sat at the heavy oak kitchen table with a glass of bourbon untouched in front of me, smoothing out the wrinkled note. The debt is still owed. Brandon hadn't just stolen from my company's pension fund. He hadn't just played with numbers on a screen. He hadn't just played with numbers on a screen. He had shaken hands with devils. He had borrowed from sharks who didn't care about FBI raids or prison sentences. They only cared about their blood money. And now that Brandon was locked away, they were looking at the next available target. The father with the assets. The grandfather with the vulnerability. I pulled out my old flip phone, the one I kept for emergencies. I dialed a number I hadn't used since the investigation. "Leonard," I said when he answered, his voice groggy with sleep. "Harrison?" It's midnight. Is everything all right? No, I said, my voice low and steady like the rumble of a concrete mixer. It's not over. Brandon left a mess bigger than the FBI found. I need you to find out who he owed money to on the street. Not the banks, the shadows. Harrison, don't do anything rash, Leonard warned. Call the agents. I will, I said, looking at the ceiling, thinking of the little boy sleeping upstairs with my gray eyes. But the law is slow, Leonard, and these people are fast. I need to know what I'm up against. I hung up. I looked at the shotgun case under the hallway bench. I realized then that my retirement wasn't going to be about fishing and sunsets. It was going to be a war of attrition. But looking at the photo of Evelyn on the mantel, I didn't feel fear. I felt a grim determination. I had built skyscrapers that withstood hurricanes. I had broken my own son's corruption. I could handle a shadow from the past. You picked the wrong family, I whispered to the empty room, my hand closing into a fist. I'm not just a builder anymore. I'm the demolition crew. This story teaches us that true legacy is not defined by the inheritance you leave behind, but by the integrity you live by. Harrison spent his life building skyscrapers and accumulating wealth thinking he was providing for his family, but he failed to build the character of his children. He learned too late that blind trust, even in family, can be dangerous, and that intuition is a powerful tool that should never be ignored. The most valuable things in life are not the houses we own, but the truth we defend and the innocent people we protect. Money can buy a house, but only love and honesty can build a home. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat and made you realize the importance of standing up for the truth, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Have you ever discovered a secret that changed how you see your family? And let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Your support helps me share more stories like this. See you in the next video.